My name's Jessica White, if you haven't been able to tell from the slide and the fact you're here. And today I'm going to be talking about who needs dashboards. So this will be a talk of two halves. The first half, I'll be talking about a few different types of dashboards throughout a business. And the second half, I'll be going through some frequently asked questions that I've had about the first half, to be honest. Hopefully with the idea to give you some help on caring for your monitoring, your dashboarding, and in general, just being very excited about the whole subject. So who am I to talk about monitoring anyway? I've been a software developer for about 2.5 years, just started working at uni days. And for the last year and a half, I've been involved in quite a few different monitoring projects, from dashboarding down to logging and alerting and the many different aspects. So I've been involved in a project that was about creating standards for dashboards. I've implemented a centralized logging system in one of the companies I used to work for using Elastic. So I pretty much like this subject a lot. But enough about me. Who needs dashboards? So first of all, what do I mean by dashboards? It's also known as visualization within monitoring. The very tactical approach I like to think about it is most of us have been in a car or drive a car. You have a dashboard there. It tells you how much petrol you have, what speed are you going at, are you breaking any laws? It will send off little alerts if suddenly your car's broken for any reason. It's pretty good for covering what a dashboard is. So why do we care? We've all seen this kind of scene in a movie, right? Where somebody's surrounded by screens. Lead of a movie jumps in saying, I need to know where the bad guy's going to be. And this poor sod, I'm minding my language, has to go and answer quite quickly. Now, who could actually do this? I know I couldn't. It's way too much information to process. But realistically, I've certainly had to do this in jobs I've worked at. As a software developer, I've had people coming to my desk asking why the website's down, unfortunately. Or how many customers are going through a particular route. And this has involved having to dive through logs or running tests. And sometimes I can't give an answer at all. The information is not available. This is where dashboarding comes in. It's a tool to help you see information and trends of information in an easy-to-read, easy-to-understand format. So this particular scene is from a film called Minority Report. You do know the film Minority Report, right? Great, because I've had a few people who have said this film's really old and made me feel quite bad about myself. But if you're not aware of the film, Tom Cruise does this very cool hand gesturing thing where he pulls together some pieces of information and walks away unscathed. I didn't think I'd ever say this, but I'd love to be as cool as Tom Cruise. And to pull information together in this way, but it's just not practical. So we use dashboardings to save us a bit of headache. Now, with this talk, I'm going to be using an example from Rick and Morty. Anyone here like Rick and Morty? You're going to like my slides more. This is great. So for those of you who haven't seen it, there's a particular episode with a biscuit factory called Simple Rick's. There's some dark undertones. If you've got a dark sense of humor, highly recommend it. But for the purpose of this exercise, it's a biscuit factory. I'm going to give an overview of 4 different categories or levels of dashboarding in relation to this biscuit factory, and who's using them and why. So let's dive in like Tom Cruise. Business intelligence. This form of dashboard is mostly used by upper management, the sort of people who are talking to investors and stakeholders. I'm going to use an analogy from something I read a while ago, which refers to these types of dashboarding in a war scene. So business intelligence is the strategic plan. It's how we're going to win the war. So some of the things it might cover is the health of a business. How are we doing compared to last time, well, this time last year, for instance? Is the business staying afloat? And it involves a lot of statistics that help towards this strategic plan. What's our next goal going to be? So examples of this. With business intelligence, you may have a customer model, and you want to know that's accurate. So with a biscuit factory, you'll want to know if your customers tend to have families. Maybe that's why they're buying biscuits. What sort of behaviours they tend to have. If you've got a family, maybe they're more likely to buy around Halloween. But your competitors are also going to have initiatives around that time period. What can we do to stay afloat during that time? As kind of hinted upon, you've also got how are you doing compared to last year? Is this business improving? Is it not? Is there any other strategies we can take to help with this? And it involves a lot of statistics. To be honest, before I started talking to people who were using these kind of dashboards, I thought it was all voodoo. But it's sensible. It's achieving achievable goals within a time period. What are we going to do in the next quarter? Why are we doing it? And these dashboards are also helpful for negotiating with your stakeholders, your investors, showing in a visible format why you've made these decisions. Following on from this is management information. This is often described as information that's financially important to the business, directly impacts the company. And as such, it's mostly associated with the sort of people who you see with Excel sheets in front of them. They could probably do with a management information dashboard. To be honest, it goes further than that, and I will go into that in more detail. But going back to that war analogy, it's tactical. It's how are we going to win the battles to achieve winning the war? The smaller projects that go towards achieving that big business goal. So simple Ricks again. These dashboards can be used in finance, marketing, product, many different departments. So we're going to focus on marketing for this one. They know that there's a business goal of achieving 8 million schmeckles for the quarter, let's say. Schmeckles is money in Rick and Morty terms. I should have just said money. So you've got to achieve this amount of money in a certain amount of time. How can we, as a department, help towards that? So marketing say we're going to release a TV advert. There's more information to a TV advert than one might originally think. So first of all, that customer model again. Judging by your customer model, are they more likely to be in during the day? Or are they more likely to be in an evening? When are you going to put this TV advert on? This has an impact on the costs versus profit. When you display a TV advert, how long it's on for has an impact on the cost. And you need to have an idea of if you're going to make any money out of it. Because at the end of the day, if you're not going to make money out of the initiative, you're not going to help towards that strategic goal we talked about earlier. And then there's monitoring the behavior around this project. You'd have a baseline for how many customers are currently hitting your website, what's the behavior right now. Because when you release your TV advert, you want to see the impact of it. Has it actually been successful? Has it been a complete flop? You need to have some sort of statistics behind it to show whether you're having an impact. So already we're exploring kind of the relations between BI and MI. They're quite closely linked. BI needs to know about the MI projects to know that it's going to achieve that big grand goal. MI needs to know about BI to kind of ascertain that the direction is correct, that it's going towards the same company directive. And then we have the last two I'm going to talk about in this part. Operational information and development information. This is where it gets a little bit grey. So we'll go back to that war analogy. BI, how to win the war. MI, how to win the battles going towards that war. But as much as you can have the plans and have some sort of direction on how you're going to do this, there needs to be somebody to actually do the fighting, the execution, the front line. So in terms of our biscuit factory, we have hardware and software going towards making our biscuits, for making orders, for having a website available with information on it. You can have all the plans in the world, but without actually having these things, you don't have a biscuit factory. And the reason why I'm talking about both of these at once is because the information on these dashboards are quite dependent on company structure and company size as well. You might have separate operational and development teams. You might be more of a DevOps format. But even that isn't completely clear. You might have different responsibilities depending on how your company splits the ideas and the work. These two areas have used dashboards more than the others as well, probably for longer. They're dealing with systems, as we probably all know, that have a lot of cogs turning. They're quite complex. By checking inputs and outputs, you're being able to find out where problems are going wrong earlier on. And they use them for more things. It's not just problems. People associate monitoring with finding out when things are going wrong with the system. But it's not. It's also finding out when things are going right, how things are behaving. So you've got system monitoring, you've got monitoring for debugging, but also for seeing how your integrations are working, for monitoring improvements, for helping making those plans. So there's many aspects to these forms of monitoring. An example for this, say you've got a database that isn't quite working the way you want it to. Maybe it's slowed down, maybe it's stopped. There's two different focus. So for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to describe operational information as monitoring how a system is running on a production environment, and development information on whether the system is running as expected. So for your database, your operational dashboard will probably cover CPU, memory, disk space, the things that your database is running on. Your development information will be looking at interactions with your database. So how you're interacting with the database in the code. Maybe it might look at how you're indexing on your database. Maybe that's having an effect. That can kind of go either way, to be honest. So they're looking at the same information, but with a very different focus. But they also need to know about each other. Software and hardware are so integrated and so intertwined. There needs to be good communication between, I want to say both departments, but it depends how you're working. So TV advert again, just to keep it continuous. The TV advert's gone live. Some of the things that need to be considered are, can we cope with the increased load? Can people actually make orders on the website? Because if the website's down or if that feature's not available, it's going to impact that MI plan. They're not going to make as much money as they wanted, which of course will affect the BI plan and the entire company goal. So that was very quick. I do have a blog on this topic as well, which goes a bit more in depth. But I've talked about these different areas quite in a separate kind of concern. They all relate to each other. They all need to know about each other. But you can do something more with this. So this is from a place I previously worked. The original idea was that we're going to merge BI and MI information into one dashboard so we could see how the company was performing towards their main strategic goal. It ended up that we ended up with developmental and operational information on here as well. So just talk you through this example graph. And yes, I know the axes are wrong. Suddenly they want to make 18 million schmeckles. They've got a lot more ambitious. But the light blue line, this one here, is referring to that BI goal, how much we want to make in a certain amount of time. The dark blue wavy line is how the company's actually performing. But then we have these dark blue dots. They're referring to events that might have had an impact towards this goal. So this was decided by heads of department and a product owner. They would come forward saying, we had this project, this is the effect we had, can we put it on a graph? He would do it. It was made out of basic HTML and JS, and it had an Excel backend, so he could put information on it without much dev concern. But it was interesting, because this was made for every 2 weeks we had a meeting, cover how the company's doing, what's happening. And the idea is that we could see progress. But it had a much bigger effect. It actually had a social effect, because suddenly people and departments could see why they were doing the work they were doing. they were seeing the impact of the work, what was going on, but also it was increasing communication. Suddenly you could see what other departments were doing. Maybe that would affect your future plans. Or you might have a third-party outage. It's out of our hands, but how can we cope with this in future? It started the discussion, and it started bringing together this sense of unity and purpose. We're all striving towards the same goal. I know it sounds like it's kind of a hippie daydream, but surprisingly, it did work. It was very good for that. And it wasn't what it was meant for. So who needs dashboards? I imagine you knew my answer before you came into this room. It was either going to be everybody or nobody, and I'm very enthusiastic about this topic. But before I go and answer this question, I just want to cover again that dashboards have many uses. They use to set baselines, to make plans, to make targets. They can be used to monitor health and see issues, to plan improvements. And there's more. They have this social impact as well. They put everybody on the same page. They start conversations and communication. They put people together with a sense of unity and purpose. Suddenly you know what your work's for. Why are you doing things? I really like dashboards. So who needs dashboards, really? Everyone. And we've talked about 4 different types of dashboard, very briefly. And there are many more types, but I hinted earlier that with MI dashboarding, they can be used more than just for the people who use Excel sheets. So let's just say that SimpleRix has a call center, people directly interacting with customers on the phones. I imagine a lot of us have this situation in our companies, and the people on the phones have some stock answers, something they've been given on a sheet of paper. When you get this question, this is what to say. What if they had a dashboard? All of a sudden, they can see how many biscuits you have in stock of a different type, or what the delivery time is to a certain place in the UK. Maybe they can see what's happening with the website. Maybe there's a problem, and they can see it interactively. Suddenly, their answers to the customers are a lot more interactive. They're a lot more tailored to experience. I want to order this kind of biscuit. When can I expect it by? We're currently low on stock on that one, so it'll be a couple of weeks. But have you considered these ones instead? Now, not only does that sound a lot more interesting to me than having to learn some stock answers off a piece of paper, but it's a much more improved customer experience. And this is already happening in quite a few companies. And some companies have taken it further. So there was a talk I went to at NDC Oslo. I know talking about how a shipping company was using, well, it was data and dashboards, but using this to estimate when ships were going to arrive to a port. And it took into account things like weather conditions. So they could alter courses of ships to get there sooner, all based on data they had shown on a dashboard. I'll tweet out a link, because unfortunately I can't remember the speaker's name right now, but it's well worth watching. On top of this, we've talked about 4 high-level categories of dashboarding. There are many more. Even in execution, you have security monitoring, performance monitoring, front-end monitoring, all kind of specialisms for their own special purpose. So yeah, there's a lot. This quote sums up for me why I'm so passionate about this subject. A friend lent me a book a while ago, and this was in it. It all goes back to the scientific method. Why are we measuring things? We want to have a baseline. Then we have an effect, and we want to see what effect that's having, if it's good, if it's bad. If we're not monitoring something, do we really care about it? I mean, why are we doing the things we're doing without having an intended effect at some point? And if you can't influence or manage something, why are you monitoring it? It's going to stay the same. So it's kind of the idea of keeping your dashboards clean and with the information that you need on there. So for the first half, I've probably convinced you that I'm very passionate about this subject, and I think dashboards are important. If this is the case, how come? When I ask people if they've used dashboards or created them in their everyday work, and they think they're a total waste of time, this is what I expect to see. Not quite this. Normally my talks aren't this popular. But you get the idea. There's a simple answer. Dashboarding's really hard to do. There's a lot of resource online, and there's great examples about how different companies have used dashboarding and monitoring, and it's very fascinating. But unfortunately, particularly dashboarding is very fit to purpose. There's not one size fits all. What will work for one place won't necessarily work for you. So it's quite hard to filter through that and find out what would be right for your situation. Over this second half, I want to go through some frequently asked questions and some things that I've worked on myself that have helped towards creating great dashboards. So first of all, there are a number of danger signs that you might see, more than there are on this slide. These are all kind of a hint that your monitoring needs some tender loving care. And one of the key points is dashboarding, though it works with alerting and logging and relies on telemetry, it's not a replacement for any of these things. It has its own unique purpose, and to use it for the right purpose. So I'm going to go through 3 of the danger signs that come up most commonly, why they might be a problem, and how I'd probably approach fixing them. So I don't know what the metrics are for. This suggests a couple of things. First of all, the information on your dashboard might be a bit stale. It's not been worked on as the work's being worked on. Dashboards should evolve much like systems and businesses do. The other thing is that there's probably problems with communication. Maybe the person who's working on these dashboards or even on your alerting isn't actually directly working with the systems that they're monitoring, be them business or otherwise. The idea of that quote earlier is that there should be some kind of action based on the things you're measuring. So having some kind of purpose behind each of your metrics. If you don't know what the metrics are for, how can you react to them? I'm going to come back to this in a second, actually. But if you're finding that this is the problem for you, it might be the case that either you need to go through the metrics that you've got and try and discover why are we doing this and trim your dashboards, or just delete them and start again. Go back to basics, start asking questions. Again, I'll go into which questions to ask, but asking questions to determine why you need a dashboard in the first place. Tick box exercise is quite closely related. No one likes tick box exercises. They're boring. Unfortunately, sometimes they're necessary. Some aspects of dashboarding will still involve this. Every time I make an API, I try and put, it's a pattern called RED, rate, error, and duration, surrounding that. But I also need to add more onto that based on the purpose of the API. The danger with this, and I've seen this personally, is somebody creates dashboard or other forms of monitoring because it's a task on their board. And one of the situations I've seen is a developer's picked up this task on, I need to make a dashboard. What do I find interesting? Put some stuff on there. Later, somebody goes to it to debug an issue in that area, but there's no structure. If that thing's red, should I react to it? What does it actually mean? What's at 72%? It's all these things that there was no actual reason for monitoring them, so you don't know how to act on them. And sometimes you miss information as well, which causes this too. So these are quite closely linked. So it's the lack of communication between the people who, A, need and use this dashboard, because there will be an audience for it, but also thinking about how it's going to be used. Don't make your dashboards a tick box exercise, please. Please love them. They're really nice, really. So again, unfortunately, it'll be going back to assess those metrics. Why are you doing it? Maybe having to start from scratch. And this one I haven't actually personally seen, but it's come up quite a few times. We've got one person who does all our dashboards. Now, there's quite a lot of work involved in doing all of this. What else does this poor person do? I mean, I like this topic, but I would hate that job. Having to do dashboards for many different purposes, for many different people, making sure they're up to date, it's gonna just collapse somewhere. You can't have that many conversations and do this work all the time and still be involved. You want someone who's either directly working with the project or is going to be using that dashboard to be involved in the design of it, and to be involved in the maintenance of it. Don't have a Morty in the corner responsible for your dashboards, please. Feel sorry for your Mortys. So again, this is bringing dashboarding back into the team. Why are we doing it? What do we need it for? And maybe, giving Morty a holiday. So where do we start? There are a few challenges. Getting buy-in is a big one, because especially if you're starting from scratch, this is a lot of work. Making sure dashboards are clear, and making sure that you know the audience for your dashboards. I'm going to go through a few of these now. So first of all, the questions that you need to ask. If you're asking your stakeholder what they want to see, you're probably not going to get a great answer or something that's very useful to you. They might have an idea of what they're interested in, but it's that phrase again, what you're interested in. How are you going to use it? So instead of asking, what do you want, there's a few ways in which you can phrase this. If you're working with BI and MI level dashboards, what are the company objectives? What are we working towards? What are our key performance indicators? What shows that this is a success? How might it fail? I like this one, because you will cover failure, and if you know how something's going to fail, you'll probably surround it with some form of alert. There's going to be many ways that you don't anticipate. For operational and development, again, you might want to know how your application or your feature's working. What's the expected experience? This links into failure again, because not all failures are a failure. They might be covered by customer experience already and not need to be covered on your dashboard. What are the key performance indicators again? This includes service level agreements. So the uptime of your services or your response times and your APIs, for example. These are all contractual agreements, and they do have a financial impact if they go wrong. You probably want them covered. So going back to our simple Rick's example, we've got MI Rick. He's very excited about his TV advert. You go, hey, MI Rick, what do you want? He goes, I want to know the increase on customer rate to our website. Almost right. You don't want to know the customer rate. People could just be interested in the website after seeing your advert, have a little look, not really put an order through. That's not going to affect your profit, your overall goal. You want to know how many customers are completing orders. You want to know where those customers have come from. If they've come through a third party, they probably haven't been impacted by your TV advert. You also want to have that baseline beforehand, as we mentioned, and be able to measure impact. So though the answer's almost there, you need to consider what your metrics are telling you and how you need to act upon them. Which brings me to my next point. If somebody asks you to add information to your dashboards, or in the creation of dashboards, you're having these initial conversations, I want you to all do one thing for me. Channel your inner toddler. Now, we've probably all been around kids when they're at their adorable stage where they won't stop asking questions. I've got a goddaughter. She drives me mad sometimes. I hope she never watches this. But I want you to do the same thing. I want you to ask questions. Why do you need the information? Why does it need to live on a dashboard? Can it live somewhere else? How long do you need it for? So with a TV advert, you probably just want to find out how that's working. The advert will go off TV. You won't need that information anymore. How long do you need it? What use does it provide, going back to having some purpose towards your metrics? Dashboards are useful for increasing transparency, communication, and that uniting of a company vision, but communication is key to creating good dashboards. So whenever that phrase, well, it might be interesting, comes up, push back, stamp your feet, channel that inner toddler, find out why it might be and if it should be on your dashboard. So again, simple RICs. Is it for measuring an impact towards a KPI? How long is the advert on for? How long do you need the information? If they're asking for raw data so that they can do calculations or modeling on, you don't want it on your dashboard. You probably want to store somewhere so that that can be worked on. Making sure it's the right format is quite important. Which brings me on to lifetimes. We've just said about the TV advert lasting for a certain amount of time. Lifetimes is key for good dashboarding. We mentioned that the monitoring systems that evolve, projects that evolve, so should the dashboards that are measuring them. Now, lifetimes can cover two different aspects. At what point metrics or dashboards should be completely deleted, removed, because you're not going to use them anymore. Say errors suddenly being covered by an alert. You've done some work around that. You don't need to keep an eye on it anymore. Remove it from your dashboard. It's covered elsewhere. But it also covers prioritization. Does it need to be in front of you? Because at the end of the day, I imagine we've all been in a situation, got a lot of boards up, but we don't really know why they're there. So lifetimes of dashboards. The BI, MI levels probably will have a shorter lifetime than the others. Which also brings me on to layers. So there's different layers of dashboard, as we've already talked about. You've got your strategic and tactical. Now, these are more likely to be shown in meetings. Even the hybrid, we had it available to people to view if they were interested. But it mostly came up in meetings, otherwise wasn't really on the walls. You've got end-to-end metrics for a journey. So I worked in a loans company. And we had from somebody visiting a website to successfully completing a loan. But another journey was if they were rejected or if they came through a third party. Then you've got project and feature. So our TV adverts might be one of them, but you might also have a search bar on your website, monitoring how that's working. And service API, website and infrastructure. The reason I want to talk about layers is because depending on what you're working on, will depend on what's shown on the TV. And also it links up to tooling. So if you're working on a particular feature, it's going to be unstable for that amount of time. As a developer, I worked in a team where when we were working on a feature for a part of a project, we'd have dashboards surrounding the services we were working on, because it would be unstable while we were doing that work. We'd leave them up for 2 weeks after that work had finished. If it had been fine for 2 weeks, there'd been no problems, it's considered stable and stored elsewhere. But we also kept up our feature level because we had stakeholders that wanted this work done. So we'd show them the dashboards, and they could be able to tell us if we haven't noticed that something's gone wrong. Occasionally happened. But also they could keep abreast of what was happening as well. With tooling, you can also have a project-level dashboard and click through to layers that you're interested in, that you need. I really like that feature. So yeah, layers. And then there's tooling. This is probably what I get asked about the most, and it's the hardest one. There's too many tools. I can't really tell you what you need to use. So a lot of these have specialities. Zabbix for operational style dashboarding. Tableau for business intelligence. And you can't really go wrong. It's not bad to use several different types of monitoring tool. It's what's fit for purpose. But there are some questions that can help you in deciding what tool you're going to use. I mean, on this dashboard, well, not dashboard, on this picture here, I've said dashboard too many times. I've used Datadog, StatsD, Elastic, a bit of Power BI, a bit of Grafana, and I've only worked in 3 places, so many tools is fine. We need to consider user and development concerns. Is it for a particular type of monitoring? Does it need to be accessible? Do you need to be able to share the dashboards without having to log in? What data sources does it support? So the data that you're showing will have come from somewhere, be it Excel or being through telemetry, being sent from your system. You need to make sure that it supports data sources you already have. Does it cover types of queries you'll most commonly be using? And does your team have experience in the tool? And if not, are the resources for learning it good? Because somebody's going to have to use it, and they're going to have to know how to use it well. Cost and hosting. What's your budget for your tooling? Also, do you want to self-host, or do you want to host a solution? This will have an effect on cost. And the other features, so does it support alerting in the way that you want it to? A couple of tools will only support email and webhooks, and then you have to do some work to put it into Slack or HipChat or whatever your tool of choice is. Some tools will have a direct integration, taking that work away. It makes life a bit easier. So it sounds boring making business cases for tooling. I like to think of it like blind date. I'm a 90s kid, I'm sorry. So you're asking the questions that you need to find out which tool is right for you. And if the tool is answering the right amount of yeses, they're not going to have all of them, but enough that you think, oh, maybe they're for me, then that's okay. Maybe it's cheap. Maybe people who are using it know how to use it. They don't need any training. Maybe it'll slack you when you need it to. So if you get really bored, just think of yourself like Cilla Black. That's how I get through the dark hours. So where can I learn more? We're getting towards the end now. But Practical Monitoring by Mike Julian is a great starter for 10. It covers dashboarding, alerting, logging. It gives examples from actual companies. I know you can't apply them straight to yours, but it gives you an idea of how they're used. It's very short. I've read it in 3 train journeys back and forth from work, and it's not very dry. So if you want to learn a bit more, great book. Online resources. Brendan Gregg's great for operational monitoring in particular, but it covers quite a lot. The use method is something that I've used for services and servers before. But there's a lot of online resources. Find what's suited to you, and then send it to me, because I always appreciate something good to read. But the top corner is what I think is most important. So when I first got interested in this topic, I started talking to people in the business I was working in. I had a very friendly MD. He taught me about how he uses BI. And he took me to different departments to show me how they used MI. I live in Nottingham, and we've got an amazing tech community with their own Slack. So I sent a message out going, I've got a new thing I want to learn about. And suddenly, businesses were telling me how they were using monitoring. I was meeting up with people from operational engineers to pretty much every department going that had a dashboard. And not only was I learning how they were using, what tools they were using, but I was learning from their pain. I've avoided so much pain from just talking to people. Now, you're at NDC, surrounded by very smart people from very interesting companies. If at all you've been inspired to learn a bit more about dashboarding, and I hope a couple of you have, go ask some questions. It's great to have a chat. And if you have a particular war story, come tell me, because I really love this stuff. So who needs dashboards? Everybody. We've covered that there's many layers and types. Dashboards are great for a social purpose as well, uniting us, bringing that transparency, putting everyone on the same page, having the same purpose. Scientific method, having that baseline and seeing how you're having an impact on your work. The audience of your dashboard. Don't make a development information dashboard for somebody who needs it for BI purposes. It's not going to suit them. Asking the right questions and pushing back, channeling that inner toddler. The layers of dashboard and what you need visible. Tooling and picking the right tool for you, and resources. So that's pretty much all from me. I will be at PubConf on Friday, doing a 5-minute talk, so you won't have to be put through too much more pain, I promise. But come along, it's great, you'll have a laugh. There's beer, there's non-alcoholic beverages, and there's great people. I really love PubConf. Get your ticket now. I don't know if I have time for questions, probably not. One? Cool. But otherwise, I'm available on Twitter, and I've got bright pink hair, so you should be able to spot me over the next couple of days. Cool. Anybody have a question? Or? Oh, cool.
You were saying that obviously you have to ask why, about why you're making the dashboard. But if you kind of invert that, how do you find places in your business where it might not be obvious that a dashboard could give you value and identify where you could usefully put that effort in?
I've had to do this personally, so I quite like this question. So when I was doing the centralized logging project, everybody was like, we already can see our logs, so we can go through different files. Slightly different situation, but similar impact. And I had to build that business case and say, look, these are the problems that we've had. If we had this tool, this is how we could have avoided them, and this is how much dev time I think it would have resolved. So kind of paying it back to money has a big effect. And it's the same for dashboarding. So again, if you're doing it for an MI project, how do you know how much money you're making without having that kind of measurement? So yeah, always play it back to money. People speak in that language really well.
Thank you.
Cool. I'll be hanging around anyway, so if you do want to ask anything, feel free. And thank you very much. You've been lovely.